Without further ado, I would like to call upon Mr. Yusmadi Yusof to deliver his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Yusmadi Yusof.
Pertama sekali saya ucapkan selamat datang kepada kawan-kawan jemputan hari ini. Izinkan saya untuk berbahasa Inggeris mengambil kira kehadiran pada hari ini. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. It gives me great pleasure to be able to welcome you to the first ASEAN OSCE conference in this August house. Ladies and gentlemen, it is during our troubled times that we need to seriously think, rethink, relook, and consider whether we have navigated ourselves wrongly, only to move further into troubled waters. It is of coincidence that this year, Malaysia and Republic of Serbia have presided over two very important regional organizations, namely ASEAN and Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Mr. Jovan informed me that he's worked directly, closely with the current chairman of OSCE, who is a foreign minister from Serbia. Yes. Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, comprised of 10 very diverse countries populated by 600 million people, while Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe is another commanding regional force with 57 member states. And I can say they are the largest security organizations currently. I don't know why this Balik Pulau boy from village tried to put 10 countries from ASEAN together with 57 countries. I don't know. Let's find it. Or what will be the synergy? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the decade of regional power and regionalism. I emphasize it's a decade of regional powers and regionalism. In Southeast Asia, we are proud to have recently announced the creation of ASEAN Community in 2015. In OSCE, much attention has been given to the crisis of Ukraine, finding regional solutions to devise security measures aimed at early warning, conflict prevention, and crisis management in the region. I have to tell you, security challenges are alarming in this region. Regional powers have the Herculean burden of issues: political security, economic and social, cultural, human rights issues. That brings to questions the major challenge of the decision-making process, deciding through consensus what is labeled positively or sometimes negatively as soft law. Some people call it the ASEAN way. Yeah? We are very familiar with consensus and non-interventions in ASEAN. Not surprisingly, many times vital but sensitive issues on democracy, human rights, and rule of law would just have to take a back seat in the interest of regional consensus. Expectations are obviously high. The challenge to manage political and economic consideration are overwhelmingly important. Nonetheless, Malaysia must also discuss concerns that are political and security-oriented. What are the present challenges? We are at an important juncture. We need only recall the threats of terror in Syria, France, the recent one, Paris, Mali, Philippines, the Mindanao. The perpetrators of violence thinks they have the world at their feet, but we will not be cowed. Can you imagine even affected Donald Trump in the United States? That worse, you know, if we're not careful. Is terrorism, war, and violence natural consequences of political conflict and clash of ideologies? I don't think so. I submit that it is not a natural consequence of politics, but ignorance. Ignorance. It is the lack of understanding unparalleled levels of prejudice which compounds hatred over hatred to threaten security and peace. The most crucial battle that we face is perhaps the lack of understanding, given the rise of conspiracy theories, hatred and prejudice, which remain the bedrock of belief perpetrated by global terror organization. The very idea of this conference, how the fishful thinkings of us in this region, not to say can be export, maybe it's not diplomatically correct, need to be shared with our colleagues in Europe. Such asymmetric tactics is dependent very much on indoctrination, belief in lifestyle. If the ideas of moderation, the idea of wasatiyah, is become our core ideas now, I think need to be shared across the globe. That's my belief as someone with short experience in Parliament for the last 5 years. Intercultural dialogue is one effort to break through that. Extremism, hatred, and prejudice exist because of misunderstanding. Jahil. The very question now is that how to respond, and the response must be sustainable. It's not just situational, it's not just reactive. It has to be something sustainable, have a strong normative ideas underlying the very actions of whoever in the Wisma Putra, in the development agencies, in NGOs, businessmen. So what we are severely lacking is not more guns and jet fighters, but more understanding. Some leaders, they are like fighting, who have more arms, more jets, more fighters. I think no. I think it's the era whereby we have to fight to have more understanding. How then the developed understanding ASEAN cannot just dialogue within ASEAN, as we commonly do. Once cannot just dialogue among its member states. No, sorry, OSCE cannot just dialogue among its member states. We have to move beyond. As ASEAN announced its foray into the global world as an ASEAN community, we must equally ask ourselves what other communities understand about our community. There's one specific item called Global ASEAN. It was in the roadmap. It was recently announced by our Prime Minister. I humbly propose one of the key area which can be further developed is called cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy is all about forging international bridges and interactions, identifying networks and power domains within cultures to transcend national boundaries. It is high time that cultural diplomacy move as an effective diplomatic tool for regional governance at a time where countries move as community, and for us in ASEAN. We have just recently moved into the world of regional community with the creation of the ASEAN community in 2015. And I have to put on records my discussion with Makarim Wibisono, who was a formerly executive director of ASEAN Foundation. There is no clear policy or regional policy on ASEAN culture diplomacy yet. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Makarim. So I think it is in need of that. There's a new political awakenings due to the new model of communications. Communication is no more vertical, no more horizontal. Every point is center. If security threat is not be countered with another peaceful ideologies, it may be the center of gravity of a new communication. But as a believer of peace and anti-violence, we have to make the new center of gravity, hopefully Malaysia, to share our idea of peace and moderation across the globe. Before I end my speech, I would also like to thank this opportunity to many people who have contributed to the success of this program. And a heartfelt thanks to our patron, the Honorable Datuk Sri Muhammad Nazri bin Abdul Aziz, Minister of Tourism and Culture of Malaysia, and he's also the chairman of IPU, Interparliamentary Union of Malaysia, and he's also the president of Parliamentary Global Actions Malaysia. I've done many great things with him, despite we are from different political party, but when it comes into global security, when it comes into something for the country, we are together. I believe that can be done for the country, and that's supposed to be the future for Malaysia. Our sponsors for today, I think big hand to Mara Investment, Pelaburan Mara, Mr. Nazim. Nazim happened to be one of the youngest group CEO. Among a few companies have interest in global security. Asia Foundation. And last but not least, I have to say that without them, this program cannot be even, get into effect, is Standford University Center for Development, Democracy and the Rule of Law. I have the privilege to convey regards from the current president, Professor Francis Fukuyama, and also another great prominent democracy scholar, Professor Larry Diamond, where me and Jovan learned during our program. They said, Yusmadi, congratulations. Convey my regards to all your audience, because this is, for your information, the first project approved by Standford University, and not in Standford, but in Malaysia. So whatever shortcoming, before it happened, I have to say, minta maaf dan terima kasih daun keladi, sehingga kita jumpa lagi. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Makarim Wibusono.
I would like also to utilize this opportunity to express my congratulations to Malaysia for their leadership in making the summit in November successful, as well as the summit in April successful. You can compare that there are many summits previously that has a serious problem, but skillfully, the Malaysian leadership can provide such kind of directions that can maintain the solidity as well as the cohesiveness of ASEAN. Why OSCE and why ASEAN are important in Europe and important in Southeast Asia? First, that OSCE was very influential to transform the Europe, which was called the region of conflicts in the past, into a region of peace. The ASEAN also has a very influential in making the Southeast Asia, which was called a region of conflict in the past, into a region of peace. As you were aware, all major power, all major war actually initiated by the conflict in Europe. The First War, the Second World War, but after the OSCE established, the major war in the world is mitigated significantly. As well as in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia was famous with a conflict between, for example, Thailand with Cambodia on the Temple of Preah, the Thailand with Malaysia on the issue of the South Thailand, Philippines with Malaysia on Sabah issues, Indonesia with Singapore on the confrontation, Indonesia with Malaysia in the past on the confrontation. But after the creation of ASEAN, situation changed significantly. We were able to maintain, for more than 3 decades, the economic growth of all members of ASEAN in the area of 6%, per year. So therefore, all ASEAN member states was called the tiger of Asia economy. But I was selected by the organizer to speak on the future of ASEAN and its challenges. So if we are going to talk about the future of ASEAN and its challenges, whether you like it or not, we have to touch on the issue of the genesis of ASEAN. If you still remember, it was created in August of 1967 in the area of uncertainty in Indochina. No one's for sure, what will be the future of ASEAN after the fall of Saigon. Because people believe after fall of Saigon, it will be fall of Phnom Penh or fall of Vientiane, and there will be like a domino theory. One by one will be actually becoming such kind like experiencing the Vietnam issues. But the leaders of ASEAN at that period of time believe that this is the time for Southeast Asia to create regional organization as a cushion to the possible threat from the Indochina. So therefore, mind you, the area of conflict tried to create a regional grouping. So the basis of that one, next, is a Bangkok Declaration. If you were aware, any declaration is not like a legal instrument, but it's a political instrument. It's not legally binding. So the basis of this is a very, such kind of like not substantially bind all of the country. For example, in the Bangkok Declarations that the ASEAN is based on good understanding, of good neighborliness and meaningful cooperation among the countries of the region already bound together by ties of history and culture. What does it mean in substance, for example? It's not so deep. Yeah, because the most important thing is how to be together. Why there was desire to create the ASEAN community? I was fortunate that I was the ASEAN SOM leaders at that period of time. So I was the one who presided over, the drafting of the Bali Concord II. Yeah, because at that period of time, the after effect of 1997 crisis is still there. In the past, prior to 1997, ASEAN was a darling of investors. So there was a huge amount of foreign direct investment to go to ASEAN. But after 1997, all foreign direct investment moved to China, moved to South America, moved to other part of the world. So how can we redirect foreign direct investment back to Southeast Asia? So the way all of the drafters at that period of time believe, if we created ASEAN community, like what European made, like a European community, this will attract, foreign direct investment, because any investor is the most coward people in the world. They don't want to take risk. The more stable the area, the more attractive the area for the investment. ASEAN community, is different. It should go through a social process. Yeah, there is a need to have like a social interaction, and then social interaction will create such kind like a social process to enhance, the ASEAN cohesiveness. So there should be a combination between the political process and social process, and on the participation on non-governmental actors. Yeah, so this will be a process of government as well as people process. What will the future challenge? Because the organizer asked me to talk about the future challenges. Yeah, first, if you see the chapter, the paragraph 10, of the ASEAN the charter, you mentioned that the ASEAN community is a political cohesive, economically integrated, and socially responsible community. So we see there are many problems. For example, right now Europe faces seriously the problem of migration. All part of Europe right now are flooded by migration. So the problem of migration is the problem of now and the future. So how can ASEAN contribute to this problem? Yeah, because in order to implement what's reflected in the paragraph 10, to create a socially responsible community. So we experience about the Rohingya refugees. So no one will accept this. Yeah. So some countries said that this is not the issue of government, because Rohingya is not citizenship of Myanmar. But whether you like, they live in Southeast Asia. Yeah, there is a problem of disaster. Yeah, so we have to do and contribute something. Thanks that Malaysia and Indonesia are willing to create like places to accommodate them. Yeah, but as an ASEAN organization, we have to have such kind of like a collective policy in responding to the problem of refugees. Secondly, also, how can we address the problem of the South China Sea? Because you were aware that People's Republic of China claims, all part of this South China Sea based on the map that issues in the 1940s, that include the 9-dash line, 9-dash line. Well, on the other hand, countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei, they have also a reference on the UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention of Law of the Sea. Yeah, and then those parts are actually belong to Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, and Brunei Darussalam. So how can we resolve the problems of sovereignty without creating a stability of Southeast Asia. So this is a challenge of ASEAN. So the other one is the strategic balance in East Asia. Yeah, right now it is already well recognized that the People's Republic of China is the second biggest economy in the world. Because of their economic capacity, they are also able to strengthen their military capacity. Yeah, so this one is be countered by the policy of rebalancing of United States in Asia. Yeah, the policy of Barack Obama, and also a policy of Japan. So how can this strategic balance of East Asia can be maintained in a peaceful manner? If it is unable to find like a peaceful equilibrium, something will happen with the future of ASEAN. So finally, I have strong belief that ASEAN is relevant not only to the past history of ASEAN, Southeast Asia, not only relevant to the challenge of Southeast Asia nowadays, but also will be relevant to the future of ASEAN because of the leadership of Malaysia, who able to strengthen, le désir d'être ensemble.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very good morning to all our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We are very privileged to have with us today His Excellency Tan Sri Razali Ismail, Chairman of the Global Movement of Moderates Foundation and former President of the United Nations Security Council. Thank you for being with us today, Tan Sri. It is really a privilege for us to have such an eminent personality to be with us today to discuss matters relating to ASEAN and OSCE.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm still a bit at sea with what rights stand for. A lot of people claim all sorts of rights in all societies, and Malaysia is not far behind in that. Everybody emphasizes rights. Not many people emphasize responsibility. That, to me, is very important. Take a leaf from the Chinese. They talk about rights and they talk about responsibility. If you don't underline the responsibility part, you will not be able to sustain the rights. This is something that we should talk to the Suhakam about, not just to talk about principles of human rights, but also human rights and the needs of our society to underline commitment of individuals to responsibility. Thank you very much. On that, I didn't mean to talk about it, but you want me to talk about ASEAN. ASEAN is, in some ways, a microcosm of what Malaysia is, in some ways. We have a huge swath of countries, 10 countries, that are heterogeneous. There are concentrations of certain ethnic groups here and there, but basically there are lots of diversity. So we're talking about a setup of heterogeneity. If you are an anthropologist, you'll be very happy to be studying the anthropological specimens of ASEAN. So I was very intrigued by the government of Malaysia saying that ASEAN should be a people-centered ASEAN. Sounds very good. But what does this mean? Or are we taking this really seriously in terms that everybody should benefit from the modernizing, developing process of the countries of ASEAN? Imagine some of the marginalized area of Malaysia, where you are just moving into the, as it were, the industrial age. Now we're going to the electronic age and all sorts of ages that changed. Some of those people will not be able to keep up. So it is incumbent on governments to make sure that the casualties will be as few as possible in every country. But if you are starting like Myanmar, where there are 40-odd ethnic groups, all diverse, and not necessarily friendly towards each other. We've never had the history of cooperating, working with each other. So they live in their own cantonments, in their own areas, provinces. They have their own guns, and they have not interacted with other bodies. That's because that was the manner the military had ruled Myanmar for over 50 years. So now it is beginning to, democracy is flooding in. And on the heels of democracy will be economic ideas for Myanmar. And a lot of those people will not be prepared, will not be ready to deal with the advancement of the economy. And given the fact that capitalism and free market looks at success and does not look too much at failures, you can see a lot of people that will lose out. All these things you cannot afford to have in ASEAN Southeast Asia. You cannot have areas or pockets of, dystopia, of areas where people are marginalized, are not involved, and have no chance to be able to deal with how to get ahead. A village culture, a village industry will stagnate you, stymie you forever and ever, not moving anywhere. So so governments have to be conscious of a innate responsibility that is there all the time, to make sure that, as in golf, the highest handicap is given the best effort. So because if you allow for pockets of dystopia or marginalized areas to exist in ASEAN, you will have problems of extremism, terrorism. You can have people coming, telling you stories about why we have to fight in Syria and all that. I totally don't believe in it. Some of you may have certain romantic feelings about it, but I don't. It is nothing but pure savagery. My religion, Islam, has nothing to do with that. But if you do not take this into account, there will be first anger, dissatisfaction, then attempts at seeking arms and doing things, and then you will have terrorism. Southeast Asia cannot afford this kind of problem. This is why the Malaysian government has tried very hard, for very good reasons, to try to do something in southern Philippines, southern Thailand. We have been relatively successful, but a lot of more things have to be done. We have to change the mindset of the people in Manila itself, the capital of the Philippines, or in Bangkok, to allow for a level playing field for all their citizens. In this case, the Muslims that have been neglected in southern Thailand as well as in southern Philippines. Otherwise, there will be huge problems that even the Philippines or Thailand will not be able to contain, but will spread to other areas. You know, we live in an age of terrorism. The ability of terrorists to be able to do virtually almost anything for as long as they are ready to die. If you have suicide bombers, they will blow up a bus together with themselves and their grandmother if they have to. But this has happened here and there. So it's not the terrorism of yesteryears, 30, 40 years ago. This is completely different. So is ASEAN ready to make sure that you give full benefits? You are able to, as it were, maximize the potential of every citizen of ASEAN so that he or she can rise to the surface to be successful. If there are so many cases of casualties, people not able to keep up with you, then you're going to have long problems. I know there's economic predictions of how well ASEAN is going to be. Complementarity, integration of industries on a regional basis. Malaysians are buying estates in Indonesia, palm oil, and get bigger. So this is the way it should be. But all those things will be under threat if there is serious discontent and actions of terrorism. I think ASEAN will still meet the targets that have been predicted for us. We will continue to be the fourth largest fourth most active economic region in the whole world. But this is not something that you can take for granted. The incoming generation, you guys and everybody else, will have to take so many things into account. But I want to stress diversity. I want to stress the fact that I was in Japan recently. I saw these friends of mine, Japanese professionals that have been with me before. They were almost like in a state of convulsion, totally not knowing what to do, because there were 236 Rohingyas, for one reason or other, they ended up in Japan. And it's totally unacceptable to the whole Japanese culture, Japanese psychodrama, whatever, that can deal with the situation. And they would pay any amount of money not to get these people to be kept in Japan. But homogeneous societies are under threat. I mean, they have to open their doors. This is what happened in Europe. They opened their doors with a lot of problems, but nevertheless, they had the courage to open their doors. Now, countries like China, Japan, that are homogeneous, have to begin to accept that there are people of different colors, different cultures, different hues, different predispositions, different religion, that would want to have to stay in their countries, and they have to accept it. So the days of homogeneity is gone, as far as I'm concerned. You can challenge me about this, but now, in the context of globalization, understanding each other's problems, working for common solutions, it is heterogeneity that must be accepted. So all our prejudices assume understanding that we could exist as an enclave of Malays, or we could exist as an enclave of non-Malays, and all that, we will have to begin to be brought to a test. And funnily enough, ironically enough, the test will mean how strong you are in terms of your own culture, in terms of your own tradition, and how adaptable can you be in dealing with the rest of the world. So it's not as if your culture will be subsumed. You cannot be an important element of society if your culture is subsumed, your traditions are taken advantage of. So you, as much as you have to be strong in your culture, your traditions, you also have to have the open-mindedness to deal with the incoming benefits of sciences, benefits of globalization. So it is a very testing situation for a lot of people. I know I can talk all day about this, but I think I've thrown certain things your way, and I would like you to respond to me. It is not important what I did in the UN. That's sometimes diplomacy is performance. You don't necessarily have to mean what you say also. After all, as my friend here understand very well, I mean, we are sent out there to tell lies on behalf of our country. But for good purpose, we do this thing. But if you want me to talk about ASEAN, this is my contribution for this hour. Thank you very much.
One question regarding ASEAN. We've had ASEAN Charter. Now we are moving towards ASEAN Community. We've had a lot of declarations, pacts, treatises. But when you talk about something very fundamental, that the ASEAN Charter is supposed to outline a lot of things, obligations between countries. How effective has that really been in meeting the kind of challenges that we have today? Because we're really diverse. We are so different that you can't say we are peas in a pod. So how effective has that kind of effort been, looking at the political landscape today?
One of the major achievements of governments in the ASEAN region has been the recognition very early as early as the 60s, that they better cooperate rather than confront each other. That they will benefit better if they deal with their neighbors, not as adversaries, but as neighbors to work together with. And in the context, Malaysia became friendly with Indonesia. We forgot our tension. The ties, despite still some problem between Thailand and Cambodia, the Thais are not pushing for the historical claims in Cambodia. By and large, ASEAN has become pretty matured, and given the impressive economic pointers that we have achieved over all these years, it can be said quite safely that we will continue to be going in that direction. And if you look back to the history of this area, you will see that the sophistication in dealing with other people, that ability has been around since a very long time. If you look at the history of, I tend to answer simple questions in a long way, I'm sorry. But if you look at the state of Malacca, the Sultanate of Malacca in the 14th century, and I would enjoin my friend from Serbia to read this. I will try to find you the books. You will find Malacca prospering in the 14th century, 15th century, as a commercial center equivalent at that time to the fame of Venice, and relevant to the needs of China, relevant to the needs of the West. And people would come and trade in Malacca and stay there. 3 different types of international currencies we use. There were Persians, people from China staying there, there were Persians staying there were all kinds of people staying there. That was the best point in time on the history of Malacca. When there was a, what do you call it, a streetwiseness about it. They understood how to deal with the pressures and advent of people coming from outside. Imperialism of the 17th century destroyed all that. Colonization destroyed entirely that effervescent spirit of energy that we had. So, but it is possible to trace in our historical or political DNA that we are able to think in terms of what is beyond our own state and make things work, and at the same time not losing our own entity as a state. So I believe ASEAN will go a long way in being able to manifest this. My only problem is individual groups of people, would they be able to also advance as well? Because we have huge, like Malaysia, it is a Muslim majority country. In Myanmar, it's a Buddhist majority country. The big numbers will, I imagine, will be able to succeed quite well, but the smaller ones. So if ASEAN is successful only on the basis of say, the application of plutocracy, where the very rich people ensure that everything is kept together through business or through politics, then this is not what we're looking for.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Many observers question about our ASEAN way for being ineffective in dealing with certain problems like transboundary haze and also human rights problems. So what's your view on this matter? And also, do you think it will be appropriate and relevant and effective for other regions outside ASEAN to practice the same way of diplomacy? Thank you.
ASEAN is very strong, strict about non-intervention, and understanding that sovereignty is such you do not interfere in the affairs of that particular country. ASEAN has got along well on the basis of that. But that doesn't mean that this principle will be applied for the future of ASEAN. Already the UN is beginning to modify that concept to include the collective right to respond in the event that there is collapse in that particular country, or there's terror and atrocities in that particular country, and the government of that country is not able to do anything about it. What is this? I can't remember. It gives you the right, it gives the international body like the UN the right to intervene in such an instance. So the emphasis on non-interference cannot be applied in all instances. So ASEAN is beginning to also say less about this, although we respect this. After all, political leaders in ASEAN have whispered into each other's ears about what they should do, and advise what they should not do. I believe that Malaysia whispered into the ears of Brunei to advise Brunei not to go too fast on Sharia and Hudud. And it is noticeable that Brunei has not proceeded very fast on the implementation of Sharia and Hudud.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri. I think that is all for our session today. We've had a very informative, insightful, and interesting session. We all know how difficult diplomacy is, especially in managing sensitive issues like security and political threats.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, next will be a video presentation on ASEAN and OSCE.
ASEAN is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, a family of 10 nations found in the southeastern sub-region of Asia. It is composed of Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Lao People's Democratic Republic, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. A forerunner of the ASEAN is the Association of Southeast Asia, or ASA. ASA is a regional bloc of the Philippines, Malaysia, and Thailand that was formed in 1961. ASEAN, however, was born on August 8, 1967 in Bangkok, when the foreign ministers of Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines met in Bangkok to sign the ASEAN Declaration that formally established what is now known as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. These 5 ministers are referred to as the founding fathers of the ASEAN. Their vision was to unite all Southeast Asian nations, which was realized when ASEAN expanded to include Brunei Darussalam on January 8, 1984, Vietnam on July 28, 1995, Lao People's Democratic Republic, and Myanmar on July 23, 1997, and Cambodia on April 30, 1999. From 5 countries, ASEAN now encompasses 10 member states with a diversity of cultures, but united in a common yearning to become one ASEAN community. ASEAN, we are many, but one.
Spanning the region from Vancouver to Vladivostok, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe promotes security in 57 states in North America, Europe, South Caucasus and Asia. The OSCE's roots go back to the 1975 Helsinki Final Act, a groundbreaking agreement reached through dialogue and consensus. The Helsinki Final Act challenged the politics and preconceived ideas of the Cold War. It sets forth 10 principles to govern relations among states, focusing on cooperation and the peaceful settlement of disputes. For OSCE, threats stem not just from troops or weapons, they also come from economic woes, they come from environmental degradation, they come from violation of human rights. The Helsinki Final Act inspired political activists across Europe and brought in the changes that led to the fall of the Berlin Wall. The principles that the country signed up to are a source of inspiration for the people working at the OSCE. They spend countless hours behind the scenes to prevent conflicts, to mediate. This is only one aspect of what the OSCE does to build security, dialogue and stability across the region. In the political and military area, the OSCE disposes of old weapons and helps to train police, border and customs officials to enhance cross-border cooperation and build democratic police forces. It is helping to destroy stockpiles of a highly toxic Soviet-era rocket fuel component which poses an acute danger to human health and the environment. In the economic and environmental area, it works to prevent tensions arising over scarce resources such as water and to strengthen energy security. Bringing the OSCE participating states together to safeguard human lives, ensure livelihoods and protect the environment is directly helping to build trust among people. In line with commitments made by all the participating states, the organization works to promote human rights, gender equality, tolerance and free media. It works with governments and civil society to combat human trafficking. The OSCE supports democratic elections. Since 1990, it has monitored more than 300 elections across the OSCE region, helping to strengthen democratic processes. The challenges to security are constantly evolving. The OSCE works to counter these challenges for the benefit of everyone.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, next will be a keynote lecture by guest speaker, Mr. Jovan Jovanovic, advisor to OSCE chairman on the future of the OSCE and its challenges. Please put your hands together to welcome Mr. Jovan Jovanovic.
I would like to express my gratitude, especially to my dear friend Yusmadi, for putting together this conference, and also to all who supported this event, especially, of course, the Center for Democracy, Development and Rule of Law from Standford University, and here is another fellow from the Asean Foundation. I'm really happy to meet him as well. It's really hard to talk after such two seasons diplomat, my good friend, Professor Dr. Makarim Vibisono, and Tansri Razali Ismail, but I'll do my best. And referring to this video, I'm sure that many of you heard for the first time about OSCE, even though this is the largest regional security organization in the world, under the Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, and it's spanning from Vancouver to Vladivostok. So, unfortunately, you all heard about Ukrainian crisis in a very bad manner. You know, it was hurtful for you when the Malaysian airplane was shut down above Ukraine. And I must just say that I'm not representing any official position. Since I'm currently out of the ministry, but I was involved with this issue not formally as an advisor. I'm an international consultant for international affairs, so I was dealing with this issue of Osce and Serbian presidency during this year. So the Serbian chairmanship over the OSCE has just symbolically ended with the ministerial council held in Belgrade at the end of last week. Thanks to this event, in which 43 foreign ministers of 57 member states participated, the Serbian capital was turned into the diplomatic capital of Europe. Unfortunately, deeply rooted divisions, primarily between Western countries and the Russian Federation, prevented the Council from reaching a consensus on many important issues and consequently adopt decisions. The issues that dominated the Council were the crisis in Ukraine, terrorism, and migration issue. In spite of the aforementioned, the general opinion is that the atmosphere of the event was positive and that it contributed to easing tensions among major international actors. The most important results of the Council came from meetings which occurred on its margins. Particularly important were the consultations that the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held with his counterparts, US Secretary of State John Kerry. They agreed that the Syrian opposition meeting should be as inclusive as possible. Turkish counterpart Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, it was the first meeting after shooting down the Russian plane over Turkey or Syria, depending on interpretations, as well as European Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini. They agreed on the need to restart the Middle East peace process. During the Ministerial Council in Belgrade, German Foreign Minister Steinmeier reiterated his country's priorities, which could be summed up in three key words: dialogue, trust, and security. Hence, the overarching priority is to reestablish security in Europe through reviving dialogue and restoring trust. More specifically, dialogue and cooperation need to be strengthened in areas such as arms control and political and military exchanges, as well as crisis prevention, including strengthening of the early warning system and confidence and security building regime. Germany will also focus on the fight against common threats such as terrorism, radicalization, drug trafficking, and the abuse of cyberspace. In the area of the second dimension, the incoming chair intends to promote economic exchanges, particularly those related to good governance, issues such as combating corruption, minimizing environmental threats, and managing cross-border migration. Last but not least, Germany plans to pay special attention to the OSCE commitments in the human dimension, which it considers essential. Consequently, it is planning to enhance cooperation with civil society organizations, particularly with the civic society platform. Germany's efforts will be also directed towards strengthening OSCE institutions and defending their autonomy by providing necessary resources, as well as coordinating their activities with other international actors like the Council of Europe, European Union, and the United Nations. Therefore, special attention will most likely be dedicated to the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, the High Commissioner on National Minorities, and the Representative for Freedom of Media. In conclusion, Europe is still a relatively stable and secure place. However, there is a waning consensus on European common security, as reflected in the Charter of Paris on the basis of the Helsinki Final Act. The implementation of the commitments has been unbalanced. It has led to a trust deficit that has weakened cornerstones of cooperative security. This crisis of European security has been aggravated by the Ukrainian crisis, but one should also not forget the combination of old and new threats, like those posed by aggressive fundamentalism and all of its consequences. They pose ever-increasing threat and are increasingly difficult to handle due to globalization. Therefore, a challenging task not only for the OSCE, but also for other important regional and international actors, is to start vigorously addressing the broader crisis of European and global security. In doing that, duplication of certain security functions should be avoided through increased coordination and division of labor. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon. My name is Shafizan Johari. And so this is the first forum in the day, for the day. So today we're going to talk about the ASEAN OSCE 2015 reflection on a year of chairmanship. And 2015 was a year of progress and yet challenging at the same time for both Southeast Asia and Europe. For some issues, the challenges are similar, some are quite different. Both regions, for example, are facing issues on migrants and refugees, the Rohingyas in Southeast Asia, and the Syrian and Iraqis in Europe. There's also issues of global rise in the so-called Islamic militants, the ISIL or the Daesh. In Southeast Asia, we are now facing with slower economic growth. In some ASEAN countries, there are questions on how democracy and freedom of press, freedom of speech are being practiced. Meanwhile, in Europe, issues of Russia versus the Western Bloc and the Ukraine separation are still dominating the news headline. So in this session, we'll try to examine the challenges and accomplishments by this year's ASEAN and OSCE chairman, Malaysia and Serbia, in managing those issues and how to move forward as a stronger regional entities. All right, my first question is, are you happy with what we have achieved during the chairmanship? And what or how should we improve? So this question, I would, Mr. Hazri.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's just get to the answer bit, to that question. I think first of all we have to recognize that Malaysia did a lot as a chairman of ASEAN, pushed many agendas forward. I think it's probably one of the most interesting and colorful ASEAN year this year. However, I would first like to reflect on the theme that ASEAN has chosen for this year, which was essentially a people-centric ASEAN, I think. And my answer would first reflect to that, right? Now, first of all, I think it's very important for us to understand that when we refer ASEAN, when we talk about ASEAN, we cannot speak about ASEAN at an abstract level, right? ASEAN is a reflection of its member nations. So I think a lot of people make this mistake because when they talk about ASEAN, they go at a more sort of like, higher level, and they talk about having, an organization that's more people-centric and so on and so forth. So if you look at that, and if you try and translate that in a more sort of like specific ways, what does a more people-centric ASEAN would look like? You might have to think about what is a more people-centric Malaysia would look like. What would be a more people-centric Singapore would look like? What would be a more people-centric Indonesia would look like, so on and so forth. Now, if we fail to understand and reflect to these common points, there is no point talking about it in a very abstract level because you cannot achieve it, right? So my point now is that it is one thing to talk about wanting ASEAN to be more people-centric. The real challenge is, are these member nations ready to be more people-centric? Now, when we talk about member nations as well, we cannot talk about it in an abstract manner. Democracy is not abstract. Democracy is when you feel that you have a relationship to play in terms of governing and in terms of the running of your nation. That is a mature democracy, right? It is not about you just going to the polling station to exercise your rights. And in fact, I have argued this so many times. Going to the polling station is not really enhancing your rights. You are actually surrendering your rights. That is why in constituents, you would go to a particular polling station and all of your rights you give to one person who's going to essentially represent you in the parliament. So you are actually surrendering your rights to them. Now that is a very important relationship that you have to understand, and in a larger picture, you have to understand it in the context of a nation state, right? So this whole idea about being more people-centric, being people to be more involved, is unfortunately to me, while it is a good step forward, it is still talking at a level of abstract manner. And when you do that, it doesn't necessarily reflect and touch the communities. And I think Tan Sri mentioned just now that one of his greatest concerns is that if ASEAN is moving forward, can all the communities within this diverse, economically diverse and politically diverse society that we have, or societies that we have in ASEAN, move along together, right? Now, in order for us to actually address that question, we have to first look at the structure of how our society is made of and how we contribute and we play a role, and whether if the nation state is ready to move that way. So in short, I mean, I can answer more questions. I think other speakers have some points as well. But in short, what I really want to say is that communities will not feel that they are part of something unless it affects them. You cannot talk about democracy to a certain disenfranchised community when they do not see how democracy can benefit them. If you go to Mindanao and you tell people, you need to stop fighting, you need to go to the polling station instead and vote, you need to be a democratic nation, they'll probably ask you, will my children have better opportunity if I do that? Can we go to school tomorrow? Will there be more hospitals that are going to be built? Can I have better opportunity in the economy or to be involved in the economy? So these are all the questions. Unless and until it affects the people on the ground, then it makes sense to them. To a more centralized or modern communities, urban communities, sometimes we tend to talk about democratization, we tend to talk about regionalization, we tend to talk about the economy in a very abstract manner. I would like to pose this question before you pose questions to me, right? How many of you think that your life will be better off if we have an ASEAN economic community? Put up your hand. How many of you in this room can tell me that you are sure that you will wake up in the morning and you would have a better economic opportunity if we have the ASEAN economic community? This is exactly my point, ladies and gentlemen. We have been talking about it at a very abstract level. If we look back on how it affects us, we don't feel it. And not until and unless we feel it, we can really be part of it. That's my answer to your question. Thank you.
Malaysia just sort of finished its duty as chairman, so we have yet to be seen the results of the chairmanship. Of course, the main burden of signing the agreement, getting everything together, I think has been done quite well. Now the bigger task as to whether we can sort of find a common ground among ASEAN, not only in terms of in the issues of economic community, as mentioned just now, but there are a lot of other problems that even among neighboring countries we are still having. We still have the what we call. We never quite resolve the issues. So there are still the issues of overlapping claims, the issues of irredentist movement in some places, and also there are issues of inter-ASEAN cooperation. When it comes to the haze issue, for example, a lot of people ask people in Maputo as to whether we have the mechanism to solve the problem. We do, but whether it is activated, effectively activated when the need arises. So I must say that there are a lot of challenges ahead. It's not just a question of signing of the agreement recently on the 22nd of November, if I'm not mistaken. That means that everything is free sailing, plain sailing for ASEAN. So ASEAN has to look into the various problems, issues, differences between the member states. Although they have moved quite a lot since 1967, that is the inception of ASEAN, from 5 member countries until now we have 10 member countries. But it doesn't mean that when you have 10 heads, you are better off in terms of solving problems. There's still a lot of things to be looked into, and I hope they are successful in resolving those issues.
Thank you, His Excellency. Next, His Excellency Jovan. Serbia was the chairman of OSCE in year 2015. And how do you see Serbia successfully achieve as a chairman? And moving forward, how should OSCE be improved as an entity?
Thank you. First, I would like to, since I was also ambassador to ASEAN based in Jakarta, just to relate to something that Harizal mentioned. And some 2 years ago, I attended a big business forum in Jakarta, and some representatives of 400 big companies, both international and from the region, participated. And then the one moment, one of the panelists asked the participants, how many of you attended some of the workshops related to the ASEAN and opportunities of doing business in ASEAN? And nobody raised their hands. So I think it's a good illustration of how far we are with the ASEAN community. Speaking about Serbian chairmanship, I think I already spoke a lot during my presentation, and who managed to follow me, I think they realize how complex this organization is, dealing with so many different issues, like I think 18 or something like that, if you look at this tree with branches, So in a way, OSCE was marginalized before the Ukrainian crisis because it has a lot of binding principles which were violated by many sides, not only by the ones who are now in the focus, like Russian Federation, and that's why it was marginalized. But then it was re-energized due to the crisis in Ukraine because it was the only international platform which was capable of resolving or trying to resolve the problems in Ukraine, and with sending this field mission and monitoring mission in eastern Ukraine. So more than 700 people are there, and another 500 are to go there. So as I mentioned, Serbia adopted a pretty minimalistic approach, being aware of its weight.
What kind of AEC that you aspired it to be?
I think there are a few other things that we need to do. Of course, we have launched the ASEAN Economic Community this year, and we have got a blueprint that we need to achieve for 2016 to 2025. But I think, as pointed out by Harizal earlier, it is not a standalone issue. Development of economic community, so that the people feel that they benefit something from ASEAN as a region. The other things that we need to do that is closely related to the development of the real economic community. One is I think the closing of the gap in terms of political governance and corruption within the region. Of course, we know what the issues are within this region in each particular country in ASEAN, but there have got to be an effort as part of the blueprint to close this gap in terms of the governance. Of course, we have a different political system. We have a democratic system. We have monarchy. We have military rule, and so on and so forth. But what we're talking about is not in terms of changing the system, but in terms of making sure that we practice proper governance, we eliminate corruption within the region.
Charles, over to you.
Thank you very much, Harizan Johari, editor from Astro Awani. And also we'd like to thank our panelists, Mr. Jovan Jovanic, Mr. Harizal Hazri, Mr. Nazim Abdurrahman, and not forgetting Dato Zakaria Sulung. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Please kindly take your seat.